I'm going to be the most annoying person with this mic, isn't it? Because I walk. And they said, no, you have to stay close. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much, Dennis and the organizers, for giving me the honor, the responsibility of opening such a big event. Of course, as the keynote, we are the one that are designed to set the pace. So I hope I set the right pace for the rest of the conference. And if not, just change it. But so I would like to acknowledge the original inhabitants, and these are not necessarily humans, so sorry guys, but there were people here before, there were any other animal people, there were other people like plants, mushrooms, bacteria, and all other forms of lives, and those are really our ancestors. So I like to acknowledge them, and and the community of beings that has been inhabiting this land with the big L. They are the ancestors, and hopefully we can learn from them to be a good ancestor for the future. So to start with, given that I've been given the honor of opening the space, we are actually gonna get a colleague and dear friend of mine directly from Australia to set the space. Sound.
Sorry.
Can you restart it as well for me?
Here at this historic and epic symposium. Good morning, I'm Willow Francis, and to start I'd just like to say how deeply honoured, humbled and grateful I am to be here at this historic and epic symposium this weekend. When Monica asked me to come along and share this tool to help unite and connect us together to start the symposium, I was in awe for sure. These luminaries and heroes of mine over the years all coming together this weekend to share their knowledge and their energy and their care. But then I was in a meditation and I realised that not only do plants interconnect and communicate with each other, they help us interconnect and communicate so well. Many years ago, I was inspired by Wade Davis's work to go and do a few years study of anthropology. And then, fast forward 10 years, I was working on a project assisting Terence Mckenna in a talk he was doing on the east coast of Australia. And we even built him a fly agaric mushroom to sit on to do his seminar, which was heaps of fun. And fast forward another 10 years and I'm meeting Monica and having the honour and pleasure to become a deep friend of hers. And then she's asked me to come here today to start this event, and here we are with Dennis. So the plants communicate in such strange ways in our lives, and I don't know if we'll ever really understand our relationship and our interconnectedness. But my goal here this morning is to bring us together, to unite us wherever we're zooming in from around the planet. And I'm going to be using an evidence-based tool from the HeartMath Institute. HeartMath are based in Boulder Creek, Colorado, and not only have they been studying the human heart and the field of neurocardiology and looking at how that helps us connect the systems in our bodies to optimize our function, but also how it helps us connect as humans non-locally as well. And the tools and techniques that they teach first and primarily bring a state of coherence to the body. So what that means is that the signal change in the heart rhythm affects the neurology, which brings us out of the fight, flight, freeze and into the neocortex, allows us to see things a bit broader. It helps soothe and settle the body. So first and foremost, it's a self-care mechanism, which in this world, the challenges of mental health, this has been a great tool to share with hundreds and hundreds of people to help them in their own lives. But also then there's a capacity with this work to go a little deeper and more subtle as we look at the heart rhythms extending into the global network, this interconnective nature that we actually have that's very subtle and very deep. And also HeartMath in the last decade has been working on this amazing tree project, and it's the Tree Interconnectivity Research Project, where they're really looking at the way humans affect trees, especially with positive emotion and large groups of people. And that's an ongoing project that's underway at the moment. My partner and I are lucky enough to have chosen one of our trees, and we're hooking up some new devices they've created at HeartMath. So we're going to have a sort of a global reach on a whole lot of different trees and just see the effects as the years go on with different exercises, and that's going to be a lot of fun. But what I'm here to do today, I'd like to get underway with, and it's really to share this tool called the Heart Lock-In. And the idea is that we're going to, as I said, we're going to connect with our own hearts and bring ourselves into balance, but then we're going to send it out and connect up with each other. And it really is a great way to unite and synchronize us so we can feel our essence as we go into this weekend. And it's a great tool at any time during the weekend to bring yourself back to balance if you've had to rush off or do anything, or the usual busy days, and a way to reset yourself as you come back online to watch the next speaker. It helps us listen better. It really is an amazing technique. So without further ado, I'd just like to get us started. So this can be done eyes open, but it's also very nice to do eyes closed, or you can just glance down gently with a soft gaze. So to start with, I'd just like you to shift your attention from your head to your heart. A great way to do that is you can put your hand on your heart if that's available to you at the moment. And then the heart really responds to that warm, soothing touch. And also dropping down to the heart takes us out of our head for a little while. And then we're going to start what's called heart-focused breathing. So we really just imagine the breath is coming in through the heart on the in-breath, and out through the heart on the out-breath. And the idea here is to really breathe a little slower and a little deeper than usual. And as a lot of us probably know, that this really brings on the parasympathetic nervous system, brings on the brake and helps slow things down a little. So just for a moment, just do some of that lovely heart-focused breathing, really imagining the breath coming in through the heart on the in-breath and out through the heart on the out-breath. Just breathing a little slower, a little deeper than your usual breathing. Don't strain or try too hard. Just breathing with a sense of ease. And as you continue with that slow, gentle, heart-focused breathing, I'd just like you now to consider someone or something in your life that you can feel a sense of gratitude or appreciation for. This can be a friend, a partner, a loved one, it can be a pet, it can be a place in nature. Just somewhere, someone, something that you can really evoke an authentic feeling of gratitude or appreciation. And you can even imagine breathing that feeling in through your heart on the in-breath and just radiating it to all the cells in your body, just bathing them in that feeling of gratitude, and then breathing out through the heart. So just a gentle, slow, deep, heart-focused breathing, accompanied with that feeling of gratitude or appreciation. Breathing it in through the body, bathing the cells in the body, and breathing it out through the heart again. And then as we continue with that slow heart-focused breathing, staying connected to that feeling of gratitude, or even deepening that feeling a little bit more, you can also start to radiate or emanate that feeling out into your room, into your house, and around to anyone in your environment. And you can almost imagine it just like a light, the way light emanates from a candle. There's no effort, there's no strain, just easily and effortlessly imagining that coherent signal, that balancing signal heading out from your heart, even going out into your town, your neighbourhood, and then starting to send it out to all beings on this planet, all living beings, and to Mother Earth herself, just sitting there gently radiating this feeling of gratitude and appreciation out into the world. And if your mind wanders off, if you get a bit distracted by things, that's always normal for the human being. That's just a signal to remind you to come back to your heart, reconnect with the breathing, anchoring yourself in the heart, and reconnecting with that feeling of gratitude or appreciation. Just letting that be evoked from the heart. Connecting with anything that brings a sense of gratitude, and then gently radiating that out into the world. And you can really especially think about everyone zooming in around the world for this symposium this weekend. Just imagine radiating your heart's care out to all of those beings, everyone involved in this symposium. Huge group of people coming together to share their knowledge, their wisdom, their love, their care, and their compassion and passion. And just staying connected to your heart, that feeling of gratitude.
Understand from the first this certainty. Butterflies don't write books, neither do lilies or violets, which doesn't mean they don't know in their own way what they are, that they don't know they are alive, that they don't feel their action upon which all consciousness sits, lightly or heavily. Humility is the prize of the leaf world. Vainglory is the bane of us, the humans. This is, of course, the poet Mary Oliver. This is part of an essay titled Upstream. And the essay actually closes with this line: attention is the beginning of devotion. And you might be wondering why we would start with poetry at a meeting which is supposed to be talking about science, medicine, and all sorts of sciencey things. And you probably are also wondering why we start with a meditation. What is that? Well, I think we're at a time where obviously we need to change, and this change needs to start also from meetings like this. And we need to ask questions in even the same questions, but in a different way. And I think poetry actually is the kind of language that can help us asking these questions differently. So the question that I posed, I guess, is if we listened, would plant tell us how to co-create a new world, the future? And I think that this new future needs devotion. And devotion is a good word because it speaks of care, love, gratitude, which you just engaged with. And also it calls in for a sense of awe, reverence, even the sense of sacredness. And the actual definition of devotion is this willingness to contribute to the flourishing of the other. And the other in this case can be, yes, other humans, but also others, the plants, the animals, the other animals, and all the other beings that are sharing this space with us. And I think that we are very lucky to have poets like Mary Oliver, because in a way they kind of tell us how to get there. So if devotion is the destination, and I think our world really needs it right now, then how do we get there? And the poets are telling us that the way to get there is with attention. But then, of course, the question is, well, what do you mean by attention? Because depending on the definition, we get to different places. Now, attention, from its Latin root, it's about waiting. It's about holding, it's about taking care, and it's about listening carefully. And in this case, for this time, I'm very interested in the waiting part, the waiting sphere of attention. Because waiting means that you have to suspend all your supposition, fixed ideas, preconception about this other. And in doing this, you actually get to a place where you can appreciate the otherness of this other. And this is important because the appreciation of the otherness of the other means that you land in a place to realize that actually that it's the self. So it's exactly what I guess many of us have experienced in our ceremonies and work with plants. At the end, they always come back to it. There is no other, but we have to appreciate the otherness to realize that. And attention is not just something that only poets can talk about and speak of. We have Charles Darwin defining attention as if sudden and close graduates into surprise, and this into astonishment, and this into stupefied amazement, which I thought, this is such a mouthful, but it's almost like you can bite in it. So there is actually something very concrete and joyful about attention when seen in this way. I have to say, though, as a scientist, this is not really how attention is understood and perceived and generally taken into our modern technoscientific world. In fact, attention in science takes a different flavor. It's more about active direction of the mind upon something or someone. And if we are really going to strip it all of poetry, then we get to, is the cognitive process of selectively concentrating on one thing, and I really like this, while ignoring others. Exactly. There are some cues everywhere. So, as you can see, that definition for as accurate it might be in some context, it loses all the poetry, which we could accept that. If it wasn't that by losing the poetry means that we are also losing this sense of beginning. Mary Oliver says attention is the beginning of a journey to devotion. And even we lose like the amazement that Darwin spoke of. Like Darwin in his masterpiece, The Origin of the Species, it doesn't finish with some grand statement about a theory. It finishes with probably one of the most poetic pieces of writing that any scientist has ever written. It talks about grandeur. It talks about awe, reverence of this beautiful entangled bank. That's how he finishes his masterpiece. So if we don't take attention in this sense, and we take it according to the more scientific definition, well, attention is no longer a beginning to anywhere or anything, but it's kind of a journey already closed and finished. It's an end, which is kind of boring. So in that sense, if it is an end, then it means that attention is referring to a pre-existing reality. And this reality is out there, it's already all there, and we just need to discover it or describe it in its objectified parts. And as you can see, the flavor is different and it tastes very Cartesian. But if you look closely, actually, this is still pretty much how we are operating. The thing with this kind of definition of this space, attentional space, is that reality is well defined, but in a way, it's already limited in its possibility from the start. So it doesn't give us the potential really to change for real. The change is only limited within the box that this kind of attention allows. And really, it's also an old story. We can probably trace it back to Plato and Aristotle, but it's pretty much the foundation of the European Enlightenment and the scientific worldview. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it comes with consequences. And the consequences are that there is a clear denial of the permeability of bodies. The fact that forms, living entities, living beings are inevitably impermeable and exchanging with each other all the time. And instead, this view of something that you can describe as something over there, like an object, underlines the idea that we are actually separate. The problem of this is that in science, this separation takes us to a place where the feeling body of us as scientists is not only simply irrelevant, but worse, is antithetical to the scientific methodology, to the scientific method. So you take the feeling body out of the picture. Very dangerous. And in doing that, of course, you're taking the feeling body of the human, in this case the scientist, out of the picture, but automatically you're also saying that you're denying the feeling body of all the others. So there is no liveliness, knowing, sentience in the other. And I'm going to give you an example so that you can see how sneaky this is. So given that, of course, the theme is ethnopharmacology, and I'm not one, I looked at the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, and of course I was very pleased, and I had to highlight it straight away, that there is devotion there. So there is an attempt to arrive at destination. So great. But then watch the language that we use to describe what this journal actually does. Yeah. We use plants, fungi, animals, others. And you use objects. Instead, why don't we have collaborate with these others? Especially after, maybe this was something that was okay 20 years ago, 10 years ago, but now we are growing, we are evolving as well, and our language needs to match how we actually are thinking and being in this world. And then look at this. Aside from the early people, which I don't know if they refer to indigenous people or I don't know what they're talking about really, but discovered is the really key word. Discovered? How many people, how many anthropologists have told the story of like asking our indigenous people everywhere, so how did you find out about this? And the plant told me. So they didn't discover. We don't discover some reality out there. We listen and we learn. And again, many of us have had this experience with plants and other beings, and we know that they're very good teachers. So something needs to change. But acknowledging that this is where we are at is also meaning that we are acknowledging that we're still denying the non-human sentience. And this is still bound up with colonial agendas, which are actually sitting nicely in disguise as ecological science or ecological enterprises. But surely, as I said, we are evolving. The science that we do is also evolving. Science doesn't need to be still a servant to colonial agendas of appropriation. It can be a collaborator of appreciating the other. So maybe we need to learn a different kind of attention. This is an attention that is felt and is experienced and is the one that Mary Oliver is talking about, is the one that Darwin is pointing at. And it's an attention that is focusing on the relational happening between, the space between others. And this kind of attention, in a way, it's almost the opposite of the first type. It's acknowledging the embodiment of this permeability across all sentience forms. It's acknowledging that we are living in this flow of forms that keep arising in such a diversity, which is the amazement that I think Darwin is pointing at. And this is a narrative of possibilities. It's not closed, it's open. This is the beginning to devotion. And of course, we can also recognize it's not the first time that this has arisen. We recognize it as the center of the Romantic Revolution. And in our time, I think we're still associating it with the artist, I call that the artist paradigm. You know, the poets can talk like this. The musicians can talk like this. Scientists do not talk like this. And if you do, you're not being scientific enough. What's wrong with you? But I think that's what we really need to change. So as a scientist, I'm trying this experiment right now with you. And of course, when we are being really kind, we are actually acknowledging that many of the indigenous people across the world have this understanding that the active and personal participation in the everyday thing, you know, the ceremony as well as the dinner, the making the food, the ritual of everyday life, it's totally connected and speaks of the well-being and the being well with and to the world. So here we are. Some still are focusing on these inanimate pebbles to be discovered and described. And then there is this other possibility of feeling these pebbles as animate and focusing as well as the pebble as the living connections between them. But really, as a scientist again, I'm not here to, you know, crucify science or be here to be against science. I'm actually suggesting here that we are not, as Western science, we are not going far enough. We are at the edge of that pier, and we are sitting there, and we don't know how to go across. And our language maybe is the problem, but also our methodologies and how we approach those methodologies are kind of constraining us. And there are other ways. So our difficulty right now as the Western modern paradigm of science is that we're struggling to come to terms with the fact that the world is an animate place, is not dead, is not full of objects. Again, this has been said many times by many poets. And in a way, if we carry on like this, I think we can all agree that this is costing us the world. So we can't really afford this price. So what if, as an exercise, as an experiment, we allow the reservoir of all of this meaning embodied in all of these feeling forms to not only penetrate us, because they do anyway, but inform us and even transform us? Of course, this sounds like a really big question. And it's like, yeah, but how do you do that? And it sounds all good, but then in practice, how do we do that? And of course, because of the nature of the world, as I'm experiencing it, I know that I cannot provide an answer that fits everyone, and then this is the new method, because it's exactly antithetical to what the new attention would require. It's about you feeling and it's about you experiencing. So all I can do is about sharing my feeling and my experiencing of this knowing and learning with plants, and how it worked and morphed me and transformed me in my context. And maybe that gives you an idea of how you can do it in your own specific context. So I'm going to start with plants as teachers. And we have Luna here, who was, of course, one of the people, the first person really to bring that concept to our Western space. Clearly, our indigenous people have had this understanding for a long time. And I'm going to show you how that worked for me. And then I'm going to show you that this was only, again, a beginning to a journey. So plants as teachers, bless you. Plants as teachers is only the start. And in this particular case, I like to speak of a beautiful plant, a beautiful tree, who was an important teacher for me. It's got many names. Maybe some of you know it as the cannonball tree. I refer to her as Aya Uma, which is her name, I think. And this is a tree that lives in the Amazon, and during a very deep dieta process with a Kokama man, this tree had lots to share and lots to teach me. At the time, maybe even a couple of years earlier, I was thinking about plant learning and how do we even start testing this concept with plants. And I was focusing on little corn seedlings for that presumed experiment that I was going to do, which wasn't working. Then fast forward a few years, I completely forgot about that. And I found myself in the middle of the jungle sitting with this plant. And the plant starts literally dictating the details of the experiment that I am to do. And so I'm there madly scribbling down in my notebook. And I started the experiment, which would become the first evidence for associative learning in plants with peas. And of course, the associative learning is a higher level of learning that is based on someone experiencing and learning to associate things. And the famous experiment of this kind of learning, you would all know it, is the famous Pavlovian dog. This is actually not Pavlov's dog, that's my dog, Picasso, who is way past associative learning, so it's quite embarrassing actually for me. I keep learning from him rather than the other way around. So just to give you a brief recap of the concept for the Pavlovian learning, Pavlov presents the dinner to the dog and the dog salivates, and then there is this famous bell that doesn't really do anything because the dog doesn't care and it doesn't mean anything to the dog. Until Pavlov presents the bell and the food together for a few times. And quickly, the dog realizes, when the bell rings, food is coming. And after a while, the bell alone, even if there is no dinner anywhere, instigate the salivation in the dog, and the dog is kind of expecting dinner to arrive. So, of course, this ability requires that the dog is able to detect the signals, to discriminate and categorize them. And all these abilities are based on some sort of internal system of values, which means that there is a subjective someone there, which of course with a dog now it's easy for us to connect with, that is feeling and experiencing. And of course, in this case, imagine just at the end, the bell, there is no food inside. But the bell alone, which actually doesn't mean anything really, it's not going to be any tasty if the dog tries to eat it. But the presence of this cue that is now being learned and associated with the food is extending the perceptual field. So it's informing of something that is not in the immediate environment. And in a way, that means that the dog is kind of like going across different spaces and different times. So it's an interesting thing to think about. Now, of course, what do you do when, it's easy to think of a dog doing this, especially if you have a dog as a pet. But what do you do if it's a pea? Well, you do exactly the same. The dinner for the pea is the blue light, and we know that seedlings, and particularly young peas, are very attracted to blue light, and this is a normal phototropic response. And then instead of the bell, I used a little fan. And just like the dog with the bell, my pea plants were like, I don't care about this, it doesn't mean anything to me. Until you put the fan and the light together. And just like for the dog, the fan alone, after a few reiterations, the fan alone is instigating the pea to move towards it. And in this case, just like with the dog, the pea is expecting the blue light to arrive. So he has learned to associate the two cues. So just like the dog, the plants must be able to detect, discriminate, categorize according to an internal value system, which implies that there is a subjective someone that is feeling and experiencing. And just like the dog, this experience is extending the field of perception across time and space. So what did I learn out of this, aside from, a very cute science experiment? Well, the feeling body is the site of the learning for scientific methodologies. And I'm saying this because this experiment and all this entire presentation wouldn't be here at all if there wasn't an extra little ingredient. So when I did this experiment, I did a few weeks of piloting, obviously. And once I thought, okay, everything is set, yeah, everything is working according, like technically everything is there, but it's not happening. So two things. One, what an idiot. I thought a plant told me how to do my experiment. Yeah, that's right. And now I actually did that. I followed as if it was for real. Of course it's not happening. What a stupid thing to do. And then there was another moment of, because this experiment was done in complete darkness and in freezing cold temperature, for my standards. And I went into the room after a few weeks of failing to dismantle the entire thing. And then something else in that moment when I was in that room, just before I turned all the lights on and I dismantled everything, says, wait one more second. And so I'm there. Okay. And then I was invited to look into my experimental setup one more time. And something which I cannot really explain, something as I looked in changed my eyes. And I could see, and I was like, oh my God, not only this is happening and this is working and the plants are actually showing me that they can do this kind of learning, but they were doing it all along and I could not see it. The importance of this is that a few seconds before that moment, I was like all my other colleagues that are laughing at me right now, say like, associative learning in plants, stupid, that's not possible. And then a second later, something has shifted, something has changed in my perceptual field, in my engaging with the body into the space, which allowed me to enter a space that wasn't available before. So the attention was of the second kind. The attention that I'm talking about was the poetic attention, of feeling and experiencing and being there. And until a second before, I was trying to be the objective scientist who is not there really. The feeling body is not there, but it is. And that is what actually saved this experiment, which then, of course, was like several months of work, but it ended up well. So if you think the plant teaches, wow, that's cool, well, there is a following step on the path to devotion. So the first, for me, was to learn how to shift attention from one mode to another, and how to acknowledge the feeling body in the space and the role that it has in the making and construction of science. But plants can also be witnesses to our further transformation. And in this case, the plant that is involved is the pea plant. And the experiment was done more recently with a colleague, which I really need to honor and acknowledge, Christy Onzik, who is a young ethnographer. And because of her, I was able to ask different questions, which speaks again to the power of true cross-disciplinarity. So the question that we ended up asking together, which on my own I don't think I would have ever had the courage to really ask, is like, how does a scientist, in that case was me, come to make sense of feeling and knowing through the paradigm of a PE learning in a particular configuration, which, by the way, then kept shifting on us. So how do you use your feeling and knowing in that context to do science? So we first built, that's Christy, we first built some four-way mazes. The mazes were pretty simple, 4 arms on a piece of perspex, which is transparent. Then we put the pea in the middle. The pot is actually cut open at the bottom so that the roots can come out. And then we cover up with soil, and the entire thing goes on top of a foam box, empty foam box. And inside, there is an infrared camera that is looking upwards so that when the root of the pea hit the perspex, we can follow what the root wants to do. And whether it's exploring the space, is deciding where to go, whatever it needs to do. So in this case, again, is the journey that we are trying to observe rather than like, yep, went to the left, yep, right. Instead, it's like, is the root knowing already what to do straight away? And the truth is that, you know, I won't show you all of this, but the truth is that some go crazy and they start exploring all over and then they don't even make a decision. And others, like this one that I'll show you because it's nice and neat, seems to like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going. So you get that version. So this is how, I apologize for a little bit of blurriness. It's an infrared camera, not the best quality. So this is how the camera is seen from underneath. And the green dotted line represents the area where we are expecting the root to come out. And the red dot in this case represents the place of the cue where we place the cue in the maze. In this case, the cue was the recorded sound of water, which is based on work that I've done before, knowing that the peas will know how to hear that and follow that cue. So if we fast forward, this was time-lapsed, but I just grabbed some little time shots. So here is the pea root coming out, all exciting. Of course, we're not seeing any of these until the end, but the camera is watching. And then if we fast forward a little bit more, oh, the root is going into an arm, and it looks like pretty neat. It's like, yep, I'm going that way, which it just happened to be the arm where the cue was. And how exciting, this experiment is gonna work really well. And then something else happened. The unexpected, which actually makes this experiment possibly the most confusing and yet the most powerful experiment I've ever made. So what happened was that we found that all pea plants in their own individual mazes are actually making the same decision. And like, great. I mean, isn't that like almost like the ideal science, 100% response to a cue? Well, unless the cue is something, but it's not the thing that you told them. So all of the plants seem to go to the same direction within the space, regardless of where I put my cue. And not only that, but when you look, imagine trying to work out in a room like this, what is the cue that the plant is actually responding to? I tried, of course, got frustrated, then totally depressed. And then thanks to Christy, it was like, wait, the plant is actually, you wanted to test decision making? Well, if the plant is showing you, yeah, of course I can make my decision. It doesn't have to be the same as your decision. And so I was like, okay, so what do we do with this? I do not know what is the cue that the plant is responding to, and I had to accept that probably I cannot know. what they were showing us was a collectively oriented behavior. So all in their own individual mazes, but all kind of making the same decision process. And the decision is something that I don't know and I cannot control for. The quintessential horror for a scientist, especially experimentalists. But I need to know what I'm controlling for. No. This knowing that is so desperately core in science is because it's given as a fact. And it means that you are finally, what a relaxing space to be able to exclude all other possibilities and just look at one at a time or a couple at a time. It feels good. Experimentally, it makes life so easy. But that's not life. So what the Ps actually were forcing me to acknowledge, it was that there are new possibilities that I didn't consider, that I couldn't consider, that I couldn't imagine at the start. And so they were inviting us, myself and Christy in that case, to slow down. Because I was freaking out, like, I can't do this. It's like, slow down. And feel around. Again, the body entering the picture. Feel around for new possible conditions. If this room is not allowing me to understand what decision is being made there, then let's change the room. Let's change the space. Let's reconfigure the relationship between bodies and space and apparatuses, like the material that we use. And so we did that. Everything changed. And we ended up actually going even outside, building a greenhouse, and then reshuffling everything. And this is a science of not knowing. I know, it's not easy. It requires much more time, much more patience with the self, much more attention, or I would say a different kind of attention, and trust. And the trust here is in the other, in the non-human other. The plants did answer my question. Can you make decisions? Oh yeah, we can. Just, we're going to show you how. And it's not necessarily going to be how you set up the site for our bodies to express. So can we work with our bodies in space together? And they had to, I call them witnesses because they knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't. So they were witnessing me in my transformation of having to reconfigure my positioning in the space and in the relationship. So new possibilities are not discovered, they are encountered. And the feeling body is now becoming the site of transforming scientific methodologies. And of course, this is very disruptive, not so good for hardcore science. But it invites more humility and less attachment to particular outcomes. And humility, if you remember the words of Mary Oliver at the beginning, it is the prize of the lived world. So it's an invitation to be more plant-like in our approaches. But I haven't finished. So I started with plants as teachers. So I started as a scientist who is the objective scientist looking to an object over there, to realize very quickly that the object is not an object, but is another sentient being, and actually can teach me. And in recognizing the subjectivity there, of course, I had to recognize that there is a subjectivity here that needs to enter that picture. So it's an encounter of the two, which, as you can see, starts to speak of the embodiment of this permeability of bodies and forms. Then, if that wasn't enough, and you're looking at your career like, where is this all going? Plants become your witness to the transformation of how this approach is going to make a totally different kind of science. By the way, the experiment with the peas is still in progress, but we have really amazing results. So it's possible to get there. It just took much longer, and it's a different journey. But I learned a lot, and in the experiencing, I think I learned a lot more about the other itself. And whether that can be translated in a scientific paper, that's my next challenge. We'll see how long it takes. Now, but it's not the end. Teachers, witness, co-creator. And this actually it's really where I'm at. So I'm pretty sure that if the last bit looked confusing, this next bit is going to look even more confusing. But it's where I'm at. So the plant in question for this is the cacao. Beautiful cacao. I've been working with these plants now for over a decade. And actually, Willow and Catherine, Willow that you met at the beginning, was the person that really introduced me, and I've been sitting with them and on my own and in ceremony with this plant many, many times. A few years ago, over the course of a year, this plant was giving me very strange cues. It was like, the entire ceremony, and then at the very end, like, 39. And like, yeah, is this a magic thing that I need to remember? Like, yeah, you just remember that. And then it was like something else. And the cues made no sense whatsoever. But as I said to you before, this is a relationship of trust, like any relationship. So, okay, I've been given all these cues. I'm just going to take note and pay attention. And then eventually, during one of the ceremonies, all of these cues got put together. And of course, I was like, and you want me to do what? I'm not doing that. But of course you do, right? So I ended up in a retreat, in complete darkness for a long time. And as it is the case with these experiences, the person that goes in and the person that comes out are two different people. And so the Monica and the scientist and the whatever that I am that went into that retreat is not the same that came out. And of course, the same is true for the science that person can do or not, and what kind of vision and what kind of eyes are looking out. So it was very transformative, but of course, I was given homework as usual. I was given a very clear vision for science, for education, and the role of ceremony working together, really for the regeneration of the human spirits at the planet. Since I was a child, I remember my mom saying, look, you don't have to do like if you have to save the world. And I'm like, but what else have I come to do if it's not that? So in a way, although I don't believe the world needs saving, but in a way, I'm actually landing right there. So my mom would be happy, I don't know. Now, I was literally in complete darkness. I was given, it looked like a little movie of all the things that I had learned, understanding that the path that I had to walk was landing me exactly in the perfect space for me to take the next step, which is what I have to do next. And this is, as I said, plants as co-creator. This is a very different way of approaching science, of approaching education, and also of approaching ceremony and ritual work. First of all, I had to, and this is the part that I really struggle with, I had to acknowledge the role of these incubation methodologies. That's how I call them. Like, I am absolutely devoted to the dieta work. It has given so much, and I have more recently witnessed others receiving so much when it's done right. Not because it's the latest fashion, but because it's work. And you're going in to really get what you need for the next step, which is the gift that you have come to deliver. And sometimes it's just a little hard for us to see. And the plants think that it's just obvious. So, it's just that. Look. So learning how to use these incubation methodologies to really listen and learn deeply from the plants, but not only. And in this context, it became very clear to me that the land in Australia would be country. It's really part of this picture. It's another entity that comes to the forth and is like, you're going to have to listen. I've got some stuff to say. And then we are going to work together to co-create this new space, which of course informs as well the science and how we teach and learn and share wisdom and knowing. And of course, in the context of the science, I was given very clear instructions of what I have to do, including, new methodology using sound, which could be deployed across all ecological systems, whether they are forests, coral reefs, or whatever. I'd just like to clarify that although the vision is very clear, this is probably work for me for the next 30 years. And, but again, I just feel like I could see so clearly that everything that I learned and done up to this point was just for this. So that's how I'm gonna move on for my work. In this context, the feeling body is actually the site of co-creating the future. There is not even another. It's just that there is a feeling body, there is a we instead of an I. There is not the scientist and the plant, but there is one feeling body who is moving across and recreating and redesigning, reimagining the space. And so in this sense, from being trained and being developed as a objective scientist in a very Cartesian system, I'm now the experiment, which is a very different feeling. So the name of this vision is Resonant Earth. As I said, it's still very confusing to me in the sense that there are many parts that it's overwhelming. There are many parts that I feel, how on earth are we gonna pull this off? And I get told over and over again that this is an exercise of deep trust and deep listening. And I'll just give you a simple example. For this project, because the land is one of the co-creators, of course, I am looking to secure a big piece of land to regenerate, but also to create. And at the moment, I don't know what the situation is in other parts of the world, but Australia is absolutely impossible. The amount of dollars that you're supposed to have to secure anything is beyond belief. And twice I was given on the table double the amount of what I needed. And twice I was told, not this one. So it's literally, it's like, okay, the right one will come and I'll know, and it will be just in the flow. And if it's not, it cannot be compromised, which again is a different kind of attitude, is a different kind of attention. But I think if we don't start actually embodying this, then we're just talking. And I think we are running out of time. So Resonant Earth at this point is just like a dragonfly. You see it, and then you don't see it, and then it's like, oh, it's beautiful. And then it's like, what was that? And this is where I'm at. And I'm just sharing with you because I think this is important as a process of co-creating. And possibly next time I will see you, or I will be given the opportunity to share. Maybe I'll have something like, this is Resonant Earth. But at least you get the truth of the beginning of a path that goes from attention to devotion. And just to share the feeling, this is a little video that a friend of mine made for me, and it doesn't really represent the full picture, but it's just, I want the feeling of, and she did this for me. So I'll just share it with you briefly so that hopefully it conveys the feeling. It's the video. Yep.
From birth, we transcend oneness into the illusion of separateness. We go from darkness to the light. Embodying the unknown for a purpose greater than our imagination could ever hold. With a cautious optimism, we step out into the world, only to find ourselves unknowingly trapped in a narrative that wasn't ours, trapped in a wheel that we can't stop running on, to arrive at a place where we say, surely this can't be it, governed by a myopic path of instant gratification, with no time to acknowledge the very source that gives us life. Or even the space to understand that the circumstance is bigger than the self. Arriving to the end of this path and feeling a sense of emptiness, a void that is looking to be filled. Introducing Resonant Earth, a place to regenerate the human spirit, and in the process of doing that, we regenerate the planet. To inspire a more integrated vision of life on Earth, providing a vibrant and grounding space to galvanize a deep listening to the wisdom of the body and its connection to the land. Where the exploration and the realization of human potential is discovered through the integration of mind, body, heart, and spirit. On a practical level, this is a deep incubation process in a pristine environment that will embrace you in the arms of Mother Nature's medicine, including physical, mental, and spiritual guidance, development sessions toward a healthy relationship with nutrition, and contemplative practices that help connect you to the frequency of life in a way that you never have before. Resonant Earth, to empower people to embrace well-being as a way of life and a means to rediscover their purpose.
And by the way, this is officially, Resonant doesn't even have a website. This is officially the first time that I'm able to speak of it. I tried. I was invited for a TEDx Sydney last year, and it got censored. So I guess I'm on the right track. So just to close, remember the pier, we are standing at this edge. We could just sit there and wait, not sure for what. We could jump in and swim just because we can, or we can ask for help to be carried across. And if we do, I think we have a lot of help. And that's why if we listen, plants will teach us, and not only teach us, but inform, transform us in this place. And of course, it's not just the plants. And what would happen, I think, is we will learn to integrate multiple realities, multiple attentions. I guess the main message from my experience over the last few decades has been that there's all of these spaces of paradox, where my mind perceives paradox, is like it's either or. It's never either or. It can be both. And to open the space to allow the paradox to exist and allow multiple truth to be available, I think is very potent. We begin to consciously co-create instead of imposing our one-way vision of the world. And there is so much deeper wisdom to be received, to be shared, things that we can't even reach on our own, but only collectively, and I mean collectively, with all the beings. And so new perspective, new perceptions, new ideas, and ultimately we all want to be inspired. And there is such an amazing opportunity just for inspiration. Once we are inspired, we see it all the time. Once someone is inspired, there's nothing is going to stop that person to get to devotion. So I couldn't not finish with poetry again, to have the proper closure. And of course, it's Mary Oliver again. So the poem is, Do Stones Feel? Do stones feel? Do they love their life? Or does their patience drown out everything else? When I walk on the beach, I gather a few. White ones, dark ones, the multiple colors. Don't worry, I say. I'll bring you back. And I do. Is the tree, as it rises delighted with its many branches, each one like a poem? Are the clouds glad to unburden their bundle of rain? Most of the world says no. No, it's not possible. I refuse to think to such a conclusion. Too terrible it would be to be wrong. Thank you. I don't know, do we have time for questions? Or, yeah? Oh, yeah, sure.
I believe we do.
Okay. I'll step back.
15 minutes.
Please, if there are questions, we'll start with that.
Thank you.
So, can you tell us at least something of what happened with peas?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Talking about attention for the last hours. I've what?
Made you have to rethink your experiment of what the variables were that they were responding to?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know? Okay.
That I really don't know. And that's exactly the point. Is like the science is allowed not to know and never to find out. But it doesn't mean that there is nothing to be learned. And that was the P, where my question is, can you do decision making? They showed me immediately. And it was up to me to acknowledge that answer, instead of looking for the answer that fitted my paradigm. And so they forced me, and if I knew, I would have gone like, okay, that's what I'm testing, right? But no, they forced me like, no, there is no way you're going to know this. You have to accept this. And it's the science of not knowing that they were trying to teach me, and I'm trying to learn it in the making.
But a traditional scientist would deny agency in that random spreading of the roots of that pea, but not deny that it happened. And you're implying agency without having evidence of it except your own intuitions.
What is the traditional scientist using for making his or her conclusion?
Well, I'm just saying they observe and they say it happens and they don't deny it, but they don't imply, and I'm not judging, I'm just saying they don't imply agency to the root spreading of the roots of a plant. They just say it happens. You're implying agency without really demonstrating the nature of the agency, because the plant actually did not do what you hoped it would do to prove agency. Mm-hmm. So now what you're really saying is it's just you're imposing on your, in a sense, I wouldn't say failed experiment, some people might say that, you're implying, you're kind of spinning the experiment to avoid the fact that you didn't prove what you set out to prove. Is that not true?
No, actually it's perfectly true. It's exactly true. In fact, I did feel I failed, and then I had to look where that feeling itself, that epistemological feeling, where was that coming from? Why would a scientist exploring fail? The scientist that says, well, you didn't demonstrate, your experiment shows simply that this is a failed experiment, and you are assuming or, giving sentience or agency to something that you haven't proven that is got agency. And it's like, well, I could just use exactly the same argument and say, like, well, you haven't proved that it doesn't have agency. And in a way, just like Mary Oliver, it would be terribly wrong. It would be terrible to be wrong. And my experience, because I'm not an objective being, I cannot be, nobody can, as a subjective being, and my entire experience of living tells me, well, in my world, plants have agency, and so I engage in that way. And the science that I do, I bring that in, because I am present, whether I like it or not. So I can pretend that I'm not there, but I am there. And I had plenty of experiences where being there was what made the science. There are some, and I'm not the only one, by the way, but there are plenty now of colleagues, and strangely enough, and this is not a criticism, but it's like, strangely enough, the majority are women, and there is a voice emerging of all of the experiences that academic journals don't even give space for, of the role of empathy, and how some science, some amazing science, and now is used as the, look at this, with baboons, with other animals, with all sorts of beings, was only possible with the scientists acknowledging that they were part of the experiment, that they were there and they were meeting others. And not doing that, for example, the work by Barbara Smuts, like not doing that was actually dangerous for her. For her not to acknowledge that there is another there would mean that she would misread all the signals and say, like, we are not happy with you. But being there fully with the feeling body and acknowledging the feeling body on the other side allowed her to make amazing discovery that would be non-accessible. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I think, I don't think we have time for the trailer right now. Do you want to make an announcement about it?
Maybe they can, because it's theirs.
Okay.
I'll just go.
Yeah. Thank you, Monica. Thank you.
Well, I can't think of a more appropriate way to open this conference than Dr. Gagliano's lecture here, because we're here to talk about changing paradigms and changing the way that we view the world and understand the world. That's the whole point of psychedelics. They are learning tools produced by these other beings, and the impossibility of separating the scientist from what the scientist studies is a lesson we're still learning. The physicists have been talking about this forever. The biologists are now beginning to. So you articulate a new way to look at nature, Dr. Gagliano, and I appreciate that you came and helped us frame the sort of overview of this conference. So thank you very much. It was a marvelous talk. So many questions, we could go on. So thanks again. And now we'll have a different kind of science, also equally interesting. Dr. Christopher McCurdy is going to share with us his work on kratom, another plant that humans interact with in very interesting ways. So we'll get started with that.